If you're watching this, I want to begin with something simple and honest. Thank you. Not because this video will change your life in 10 minutes, or because I have some miracle answer, but because by clicking here, you've chosen to listen to something that most people never talk about. Something quiet, private, and in many cases, quietly shaping the way you feel, move, and relate to the world around you. There are things we do that we don't tell anyone about, not out of shame necessarily, but because they're simply routine, like brushing our teeth or turning off the light before bed. For many men in their 50s, 60s, and beyond, masturbation falls into that same category, something done in the background of life, a release, a habit, a moment to yourself. Maybe it's been that way for years, but I want to ask you, gently and respectfully, to pause with me here just for a few minutes and consider something you may never have considered before. What if that routine wasn't as harmless as you thought? What if it's quietly draining more than it's giving? I've sat across from dozens of men, good men, smart men, who tell me about their fatigue. Not just the physical kind, though that's often the starting point. They speak of a flatness, a fog. They say things like, "I just don't feel like myself," or "I'm here, but I don't feel all the way here." Some talk about relationships that feel distant, or a sense of restlessness that lingers even after a decent night's sleep. And often, when I ask about their daily routines, their rhythms, their stress relief, they mention it. Sometimes awkwardly, sometimes with a shrug. Well, yeah, I still take care of things myself once in a while. It helps me relax. There's no judgment in my voice when I hear that. I understand it. Truly, we are wired for touch, for pleasure, for release. And for decades, the cultural message, especially in modern media, has been that as long as it's consensual and doesn't interfere with life, masturbation is healthy. And that's not entirely wrong, but it's not entirely complete either. Not when we're talking about older men, not when we're talking about bodies that don't recover like they used to, about hormones that shift more slowly, about hearts that crave connection just as much as physical satisfaction. Let me tell you about someone I'll call Michael. He's a man in his late 60s, retired, still relatively active, thoughtful, kind. He came to see me not for any one big problem, but for a string of small, persistent ones. Low energy, trouble focusing, a sense of dullness in his days. He'd been to other doctors, had his labs checked, tried a few supplements. Nothing stuck. And when I sat with him, listened closely, and asked the questions that live in the corners of these conversations, he eventually admitted something. Most nights, around 11 or so, after a bit of TV or scrolling on his phone, he'd masturbate. Not with any particular thrill, not even out of strong desire, just out of habit. It helped him sleep, he said, or at least he thought it did. What we eventually uncovered together was this: Michael wasn't tired because he was old. He wasn't foggy because he was broken. He was drained because his nervous system was being constantly pinged, activated, and then dulled, without ever fully restoring. Each night, that small dopamine spike gave a momentary lift, followed by a slow hormonal dip. His prolactin levels, something few ever think about, rose after release, which disrupted his natural testosterone rhythm. Over time, this pattern, not once in a while, but night after night, began to flatten his motivational curve. He wasn't burnt out. He was simply overtapped. And Michael's story is not unique. In fact, it's more common than you might believe. The older male body processes stimulation differently than it did at 25. Your endocrine system, the elegant ballet of hormones that regulate mood, libido, and energy, becomes more sensitive to disruption. Dopamine, the neurotransmitter most closely linked to desire and motivation, gets released during masturbation, especially when paired with visual stimulation or fantasy. But in a body where dopamine pathways are already weathered by decades of stress, sugar, screens, and emotional withdrawal, those brief spikes followed by crashes don't just bring temporary relief, they create long-term imbalance. What many men don't realize is that every release isn't just a letting go, It's a full-body signal to reset. Your blood vessels dilate, your heart rate shifts, your nervous system toggles between stimulation and sedation. And that's fine, if it happens with conscious rhythm and enough time for recovery. But if it becomes a nightly ritual, especially one done quickly, in secret, with no relational or emotional component, it begins to siphon more than it gives. Imagine your vitality like a battery that charges during the day. Each time you plug in for stimulation, especially without depth or connection, you pull a little current. Not much perhaps, but night after night, week after week, the reserves dwindle. There's something else I've seen, and it's harder to measure on a lab test. It's the emotional echo of this pattern, the way masturbation, particularly in later life, becomes a placeholder for something deeper. I've met widowers who still reach for that quiet act because it's familiar. I've spoken with men who live alone and tell me that their solitary moments are the only physical release they feel in a week. For some, it's a form of escape. A few seconds of sensation in a day that otherwise feels dull or lonely. But over time, even that pleasure becomes hollow. The act begins to numb the very feeling it once awakened. The highs aren't as high, the lows stretch longer, and the distance between self and self grows wider. Masturbation becomes less about desire and more about sedation. It mimics intimacy, but doesn't nourish it. It offers control, but leaves the heart untouched. And that's where I want to speak most clearly. Because this isn't a video about guilt. It's not about labeling a private habit as bad. It's about curiosity, about asking yourself, what am I really reaching for? When I touch myself, am I seeking comfort, connection, escape, relief from anxiety, boredom, or restlessness? And more importantly, what happens afterward? Do I feel more alive, more grounded, more connected to my own sense of masculinity? Or do I feel just a little more numb? Years ago, I began to notice these patterns not just in patient charts, but in my own understanding of how men live with their bodies as they age. I began to notice that the men who felt most vibrant weren't necessarily the ones with the best blood work or the youngest partners. They were the ones who had a relationship with their own energy, who treated their arousal not as a faucet to be turned on and off, but as a signal, like hunger or thirst, that could be respected, channeled, and even transformed. They had learned, consciously or not, to hold a charge, to feel that spark and breathe through it, to let it grow and fade naturally, not just mechanically. They were men who had made peace with desire, not by indulging every impulse, but by learning to listen more deeply to what the body was actually asking for. It was through them, and through the quiet confessions of patients like Michael, that I began to see this not as a medical issue, but as a spiritual one. As men, especially in later life, we're not just dealing with hormones, we're dealing with meaning. And when the small daily choices we make start to chip away at our vitality, it's not just our health that suffers, it's our sense of purpose. Now, I know this may stir discomfort. It may raise questions you weren't expecting to confront. But discomfort is a doorway, and behind it, often, is insight. I'm not asking you to change anything yet. I'm asking you to simply notice. What happens in your body after you masturbate? What happens in your mind the next morning? What happens in your relationships, not just sexual, but emotional, over time? Does the habit give you life? Or does it take a little more than it gives? These are questions only you can answer, but you don't have to answer them right away. Just begin noticing. Begin paying attention to the rhythms you've long stopped questioning. Begin asking yourself, not with shame, but with genuine self-respect, what kind of man you are becoming through these quiet, unseen choices. Because if no one else has said it to you recently, let me say it now. Your energy is sacred. Your body may be aging, yes, but it still holds wisdom, still holds fire, still holds the power to awaken, to connect, to restore. And sometimes that restoration doesn't come from doing more, but from doing less, from slowing down, from listening inward. And if you're willing, just for a few days, to step back and observe, not to quit cold turkey or punish yourself, but to simply become aware, You may find that something unexpected happens. You may notice a flicker of energy returning, a forgotten desire to touch someone's hand, a dream you haven't recalled in years. You may discover that your body has been whispering to you all along, asking not for release, but for reconnection. We'll talk more about what to do with that energy, how to work with it, and how to transform it in the next part of this conversation. But for now, just stay with me. Stay in that quiet place between habit and awareness. Something important is waking up there. When we begin to understand our bodies not as machines to be pushed or fixed, but as living, breathing stories of our experiences and choices, something shifts. This awareness opens a door to something deeper than habit or routine. It opens the possibility of connection. Not just connection with others, but connection with ourselves. And that is where real healing begins. I want to share with you a perspective I've held close in my work and life. The idea that energy, especially as we age, is less about how much we have and more about how we manage it. Imagine your vitality as an old, wise flame. It doesn't burn like a wild blaze anymore. It flickers and breathes, responding to the air and the space you create around it. Sometimes, if you blow on it too hard or try to force it, it sputters out. But if you tend it gently, with care and patience, it glows steadily, offering warmth and light. This metaphor is at the heart of how I invite men like you to approach the urge to masturbate differently, not as a forbidden act or something to be suppressed, but as a signal, a gentle knock on the door of your attention. What if, instead of immediately answering that knock with action, you paused just long enough to listen, to feel what's behind the urge? You might find that sometimes it's just the body wanting release, pure and simple, and that's okay. But other times it might be loneliness, boredom, or an unspoken sorrow. It could be anxiety that's tangled itself up with desire, or a yearning for touch that's been unmet for too long. When you learn to sit with these feelings without rushing to fix them, you create space for deeper understanding, and often a different kind of relief. I encourage you to try a simple practice I call the 7-day pause. For 1 week, try stepping back from your usual routine. No masturbation, not because it's wrong, but because you're giving yourself the chance to notice what changes in your body, your mind, and your spirit. What do you feel? What thoughts come up? What sensations stir inside you? You might be surprised by the answers. Some men tell me they feel restless at first, like a low hum of discomfort. Others discover unexpected bursts of energy, creativity, or even a renewed interest in the world around them. Many notice a clearer connection to their own emotions, things they'd long ignored or pushed aside. During those moments when the urge arises, try redirecting that energy gently. You could take a slow, warm shower, letting the water wash over you as you breathe deeply. Or step outside and feel the earth beneath your feet, whether it's grass, soil, or pavement. Walk barefoot if you can. There's something grounding about that simple contact with the natural world. Maybe pick up a book you love or read poetry aloud to yourself, letting the words stir something inside you. Or reach out to someone, a friend, a family member, a partner, and share a simple hello. These small acts can build new pathways of connection, ones that feed your spirit as well as your body. This isn't about pushing through discomfort or denying a natural impulse. It's about inviting a richer conversation with yourself, about seeing your body not just as a source of pleasure, but as a wise companion offering messages that matter. As this new awareness grows, many men find themselves reconnecting to things they'd almost forgotten. The joy of touch that isn't rushed or transactional, the warmth of eye contact, the laughter shared with friends. Some rediscover old passions, a guitar gathering dust, a garden needing care, a journal waiting to be filled. Others find courage to speak openly with their partners, to explore intimacy that's more about presence than performance. One of the most beautiful things I've witnessed in my work is how men, once caught in cycles of isolation and numbness, begin to reclaim their vitality, not by doing more, but by feeling more. They start to trust themselves again, to honor their rhythms, and to create space for the fullness of life's experience. The body, after all, is not a problem to be solved, but a mystery to be explored. I understand that this journey can feel daunting. It asks you to look at parts of yourself you might have kept in the shadows for years. But remember, courage is not the absence of fear. It is the choice to move forward in spite of it. And every step you take toward this deeper awareness is a step toward healing. If you're wondering how to begin, start simply. Tonight, before you drift off to sleep, take a moment to write a single sentence in a journal or on a piece of paper. What am I really seeking when I reach for myself? Don't rush to answer. Let the question sit with you like a gentle echo. And if you feel ready, share that sentence with me or others who understand. You don't have to carry this alone. Connection, even the quiet kind, can be the balm we all need. As you move through this process, keep in mind that your journey is your own. There is no perfect way to feel, no timeline to follow, no checklist to complete. What matters is the intention behind your actions, the respect you show your body and spirit, the kindness you offer yourself when things feel difficult. You are not defined by a habit. You are not reduced by your struggles. You are a whole man, rich with history, complexity, and possibility. And your vitality, your life force, is still very much alive. I want you to carry this with you. Every man deserves to feel connected to himself, to others, and to the life that calls him forward. When you begin to see your energy as something precious, rather than something to be used up, you open the door to a fuller, deeper experience of who you are. If this video has touched something in you, I invite you to join this conversation, not just here, but in your own life. Look honestly at your patterns, listen deeply to your needs, and take gentle steps toward reclaiming your vitality. And if you feel called to, subscribe to this channel. Here, we explore these truths together, without judgment or gimmicks, just honest, compassionate dialogue about what it means to grow older with strength, dignity, and hope. Thank you for giving this your time and attention. Your willingness to listen to yourself is a powerful act of courage. Remember, you are not alone on this path, and with every new awareness, every small shift, you're lighting a spark that can grow into a steady flame. Take that spark with you today, tend it gently, and watch how your life begins to glow again.